Let me be clear. The Israeli hostages are innocent men, women, and children, abducted for no reason other than being Israeli or foreigners who were in Israel on October 7th. They are being starved, tortured, and hidden away in Hamas's underground dungeons. Just because we were forced to exchange murderers for innocents does not mean there is any point of comparison. Israel has returned to war in Gaza. This is not a decision we made lightly, but one that was forced upon us by Hamas. We either act or we wait for another massacre. We either eliminate threats or we wait until those threats take innocent lives. There will be no sanctuary for terrorists, not in Judea and Samaria, not in Gaza, not in Lebanon, not anywhere. So let all enemies of Israel, whether in Gaza, Judea and Samaria, Lebanon, Yemen, or Iran, understand this. If you seek to harm our people, we will rise and strike. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Special Coordinator Kach, for your briefing. Today and yesterday, certain members of this Council made an outrageous comparison, one so morally obscene that it must be addressed at the outset. They equated the Israeli hostages held in brutal captivity underground by Hamas with Palestinian terrorists legally arrested by Israel. Let me be clear. The Israeli hostages are innocent men, women, and children, abducted for no reason other than being Israeli or foreigners who were in Israel on October 7th. They are being starved, tortured, and hidden away in Hamas's underground dungeons. In contrast, Palestinians who have been arrested by Israel are terrorists, many with blood on their hands. They have committed the most heinous acts of terror, from cold-blooded murder to producing suicide bombs to planning mass casualty attacks. For the sake of freeing our hostages, we found ourselves in an impossible position, having to release many of these prisoners. Among them were 200 convicted murderers serving life sentences for killing Israelis or Palestinians. But they were convicted. Just because we were forced to exchange murderers for innocents does not mean there is any point of comparison. Do not be mistaken. Anyone who attempts to draw such an equation is intentionally promoting Hamas propaganda. The Palestinian prisoners are fed, clothed, and protected. They have access to legal counsel and the benefit of a robust and independent judiciary that will review their cases without bias. To compare them to hostages is not only an insult to the victims, it is plain moral bankruptcy. We have unfortunately come to expect such bankruptcy from some at this table. Madam President, Israel has returned to war in Gaza. This is not a decision we made lightly, but one that was forced upon us by Hamas. After weeks, we waited for weeks. After weeks of negotiations, after offering to extend the ceasefire in good faith, Hamas refused to release our hostages and continued to stall negotiations. They knew it's Ramadan, they knew it's Passover coming, but they decided to reject all offers. The world watched as Hamas spat in our face and the face of the Israeli people waiting for the return of their loved ones. The world watched as Hamas rejected every opportunity to return 59 innocent men, women, and children home. Israel had no choice but to act. So we are acting decisively. We are striking. Hamas targets with precision. In recent days, Israel has eliminated several top Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists. They include Mahmoud Marzouk Ahmad Abu Atfa, responsible for Hamas's internal security forces, Rashid Jihad, head of Hamas's general security forces, and Hassam El-Dalias, head of the Hamas government in Gaza, and a key authority figure. Along with these arch-terrorists, several senior terrorist commanders have also been eliminated. We want our people back. But until Hamas returns our hostages, the destruction of their regime will continue without delay, without pause. Hamas has a choice. They can come back to the table and negotiate, or they can wait and watch their leadership fall one by one. We will not stop until our people come home, all of them. Colleagues, amid all the noise, one fact will forever remain unchanged. Israel will never again tolerate threats to our civilians, from any place, from any group, anywhere. There will be no exceptions. How many times we spoke about Hamas in Gaza and about the threat it poses on our communities? It was ignored. It will not happen again. We will do whatever is necessary to protect our people from Palestinian terrorism, from Houthi terrorism, from Iranian terrorism, from terrorism of any kind. If history has taught us anything, is that the world cannot be trusted to do it for us. We will do it ourselves. The empty words for many of these council members, their deafening silence in the face of terror, have only emboldened those who seek our destruction. The world watched as Hamas turned Gaza into a terror state. I want to remind you, we left Gaza in 2005. Mr. Mansour can tell you what they did to his colleagues. They threw them off the rooftops. They took over Gaza, and we saw what happened there. The world watched as Hamas turned Gaza into a terror state. Israel does not have the luxury of ignorance. We do not have the luxury of waiting for another massacre before acting. And now let's speak about Judea and Samaria. Our actions in Judea and Samaria are essential. In the past 16 months alone, well over 2,000 attempted terror attacks have originated from Judea and Samaria. No one mentioned that. In just the past few months, 46 people have been murdered in terror attacks. No one mentioned that. More than 1,200 others have been injured. This year, innocent lives have already been stolen. Among them, 75-year-old Tamar Edri. Over 100 more have been injured. They are fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. Entire families torn apart by the same forces that carried out the atrocities of October 7. And these terrorists do not operate in isolation. What is happening in Judea and Samaria is not just an internal security matter. It is another front in Iran's multi-front war against Israel and the Jewish people. But it is also the byproduct of the Palestinian Authority's stunning incompetence, negligence, and growing irrelevance. And I will elaborate on that later. But let's be clear. The invisible hand behind this chaos is Iran. It is Iran that arms, funds, and directs Hamas and other terror cells in Judea and Samaria, just as it does in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. It is Iran that has spent years infiltrating Palestinian terrorist organizations, smuggling in weapons, training their operatives, and flooding the region with advanced explosives. Iran has established and maintains Islamist terrorist frameworks in Judea and Samaria, through Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It authorizes attacks and transfers millions of dollars every year to support these terrorists, some of whom the Palestinian Authority is also trying to capture. They are trying. For example, Islam Azaiza was arrested not by us, by the Palestinian Authority for its involvement in terror attacks, including against the PA. However, it further came to light that during the interrogation, they found out that it wasn't only himself. He had 8 other Palestinian terrorists that were managing funds supplied by Iran to support their terror in Judea and Samaria. Iran's influence does not stop at funding. Through its terrorist mechanisms and proxies, it is attempting to transfer massive quantities of weapons, including munitions, anti-tank weapons, and explosives, into the hands of terrorists. The IDF's operations in Judea and Samaria are focused on disrupting these activities, breaking down terrorist networks, and dismantling Iranian influence before it can spread further. Israel has also intercepted countless shipments of Iranian weaponry, disguised as civilian cargo. But we cannot stop everything. We cannot intercept them all. The world should not pretend that these weapons are for anything other than the slaughter of innocent Israelis. Iran is working tirelessly to turn Judea and Samaria into a second Gaza. They succeeded already. Look what happened to Gaza for 2005. They succeeded. Now they're trying to do the same in Judea and Samaria. But what the Palestinian Authority truly done to stop it? Nothing. This is not for lack of trying, because as Mr. Mansour can tell you, they have tried. The PA has attempted many counter-terrorism operations to dismantle the terror networks entrenched in their backyard. But it has failed. It has been unable to remove the terror groups controlling cities, not streets, not neighborhoods, cities, like Jenin, Tulkarem. Mr. Mansour, we listen very carefully to all of your very long speeches, very patiently. But let's be honest for a moment. Let's talk about the real facts, what's happening in Judea and Samaria. Let's talk about the Palestinian Authority's Jenin operations you conducted in January, not us. The PA, Special Forces, Security Services, I don't know all the names of the organizations, what you did in January in Judea and Samaria. You tried. You managed to arrest 247 terrorists and seize hundreds of weapons in your operations, but utterly failed to disrupt Jenin terrorist operations. You even allowed funds meant for Gaza to be stolen under your watch. Your forces were met in those camps with resentment, distrust, and defiance, not from Israel, but from your own people. They see you as weak, corrupt, and incapable of governance. You have no control over Jenin, Mr. Mansour. You have no control over Tulkarem. Your administration is little more than a figurehead as your authority crumbles. The PA has been unable to govern, unable to provide security, and unable to contain the threat that now faces Israeli civilians. So just as we have seen before, the PA quietly steps aside and leaves the job to us. So we have to go to those camps. We have no desire to go to the camps in Nur Shams, in Jenin, and take care of those threats and terror cells. But we have no other choice, because we know what will happen if we will wait. Those terror cells We will see them in the streets of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. The choice Israel faces is simple, yet most nations in this room cannot comprehend it. We either act or we wait for another massacre. We either eliminate threats or we wait until those threats take innocent lives. We have tried waiting before, and we will never make that mistake again. There will be no sanctuary for terrorists, not in Judea and Samaria, not in Gaza, not in Lebanon, not anywhere. So let all enemies of Israel, whether in Gaza, Judea and Samaria, Lebanon, Yemen, or Iran, understand this. If you seek to harm our people, we will rise and strike. Thank you, Madam President.